stream.
Well, I will stop the stream.
There's
Yeah.
way to do it.
Right, you just go down the bottom,
And
right,
tell it to
or
stop.
at the top. I can hit the live stream thing, right?
It's a little more complicated to end. Just like let me know when you guys want to start.
That'll probably be about 15 minutes or so, Joe.
Okay. All right, good. All right, you folks are live. You ready to go?
All right, so we will begin our second budget work session then, prior to the official start of the meeting. So Karen will pull up the presentation on the screen. It's also available in your computers if they're functioning properly. Shot.
That was a shot.
Just Adele, not at you. So just to review again, our process is always, we look at basically our focus areas for our budget. So on to the next slide, Karen. We have our strategic plan. We have our board and superintendent goals that are derived each year. Continue to look to grow our community schools impact in the community. Looking at how we can meet the needs of students as they diversify. Continue to work with our educational instructional department leaders to plan with those who are closest to the work. And if we can realize efficiencies without impacting our outcomes in the classroom, we're always looking for ways to do that. And then we continue to have priority areas, particularly coming out of the pandemic, which are to lean further into supporting Math RTI, to implement the science of reading to a greater extent over the next several years, to promote civics whenever possible, and to support our English language learning students. And our budget is certainly a representation of those goals and values. Our budget process is to look at the revenue and expenses as they come in and as the numbers change. Based on where we started a few weeks ago with our first session, and then to this session, you're not going to see a lot of change. But we'll talk about what the tea leaves are showing as of now, and we'll operate with the information available to us. And then we make strategic changes to the budget just based on the priorities that are necessary. So our second draft highlights have effectively not changed since our last meeting. Still projecting a total budget of $22,400,000 and 3% increase, which is the allowable levy. And then we'll have some dialogue about what the bus resolution would entail for us in the purchasing of buses this year, which is a subsequent agenda item, but we'll speak to the value of leasing versus purchasing buses. Our state aid, as we know, is the big question mark. So we're appreciative of our legislative representatives advocating for our school and for similar schools for the restoration of safe harmless funding, and are pleased to see the legislature advocate for the restoration of that and an additional 3% added on top of last year's foundation aid. So we're very hopeful that the governor and the legislature can come to terms similar to that. Our federal aid, we're not anticipating any COVID windfalls related to federal aid or stimulus funding as opposed to previous years. And then we're looking at appropriating our fund balance from our fund balance 1.6 million to offset the increases in our budget and to keep things within the allowable levy limit. And once again, the amount of the tax cap is going to be dependent on what we decide with regards to purchasing buses. So on that note, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Wood and he can get into the weeds a little bit.
I'll quickly talk about the tax levy. I did include tax levy cap documents, and actually two of them kind of gives you the range. It really will range from last time, the initial was about a 2.8% increase in the tax levy. And then now looking at the pricing of our three proposed buses, that range is actually going to be anywhere from 2.28% up to about 3%, depending on which option we choose in terms of the purchasing of the buses. The lowest end, 2.28, that's dependent, that is, if we ended up purchasing the buses outright using our fund balance, then we can't use that loan, if you will, as an exclusion, whereas the 33%, the higher end, that is if we bond the buses out and we actually purchase them over a 5-year process period and not lease them and not buy them right up front. So that's why there's a range there. That's why it's really dependent on what we decide on how we want to pursue with the buses. So anywhere from 2.28 to a 3% per tax levy. The major categories are really haven't changed much at all. These are technically updated, and the budget amount, proposed budget amount, is the same amount as the first hearing. Some minor changes within the categories, depending, shifting of expenses. But in reality, if you look at it, I mean, there's really nominal changes across the board because really, other than knowing our health consortium, our health premium rates, nothing else has really changed, with the exception of what we're going to do with the buses.
And the BOCES is down 16.
Well, that is based off of last year because we in essence, we stopped using the PASS program. And as a result, we are seeing a savings this year in it, but we don't have the actual program number. So I'm really basing it off of what we are paying currently. So we don't have that actual number, but that's what I'm anticipating, that it's going to be a decrease on the program side of the BOCES expenses because we're not utilizing the PASS program any longer. I think we have 3 kids there currently, but with the bringing on the stream program and using ADK Woods, we're kind of doing those things that alternative setting in-house. So we should see a savings in BOCES, but we haven't gotten their actual proposed budget yet for programming. Percentage of the budgets, again, relatively unchanged from the first hearing. Minor tweaks. I think last time the program side was like 79.9 something percent and then 79.86%. And that's really just a shifting of expense related items within the 3 categories. The revenue source, same thing. The change there is federal aid. Before the first time around, I had like $33,000 put in that line, and that really was I moved it out. It's not like we're losing federal aid, but federal aid typically goes in different funds, and it's really not a revenue source. Our title programs, we've in the last few years been getting a grant from the federal government. It's a rural education grant. This year it's like $36,000. I think next year they're projecting $24,000. So, but we typically keep our federal funds in a separate account and we expense it out of there, and it doesn't become part of the actual general budget. And that's why I removed it out of there. As Tim said, we no longer have the ARP funds coming in, so we're not using it as a revenue source. Otherwise, it's pretty similar to what it was last time. 79% property tax, 11% state aid. One area that is higher than what really we want it to be, but we do need to use it, is the appropriated fund balance. That's sitting at about 7%, about $1.6 million. Until we know what the state's going to do with their foundation aid, this is what the best case. But we can't rely on a 7% of revenue from our fund balance more than probably 2 years, possibly 3, and then what is a healthy situation then becomes a situation where we can no longer tap into it. So that's a short-term fix in terms of revenue, but you really don't want to build a budget off of using appropriated fund balance as a source of revenue. I did add the tax levy proposed charts. This is something that I've used in the past, but I figured I would update it just to kind of show where we currently are and what the proposed is, 24-25. And these numbers are slightly, if you look at current year and then proposed year coming up, they are not really showing the true picture because this past year Wilmington decided to go with an 80% equalization rate and not 100%. So their number actually this year is a little over $6 per thousand because they went with the 80% equalization rate. Up until this year, it's my recollection, always been 100%. So depending on if that returns back the next year, and that's always, the towns decide that. So couldn't really add both in the same year to show that, but that's really, Wilmington currently, it's a little over $6 per thousand that they're actually, their levy is.
What were they doing at the 100% equalization?
If it was 100%, it would be the same as ours.
Okay,
Same as the town of North
Okay.
Elba and the village of Lake Placid.
okay,
Albeit because up until this current year of 23-24, both Wilmington and North Elba have had the same tax levy because it was both 100% equalization rate.
Okay.
They clearly pay different amounts because of their property size, a number of homes, but it was the same dollar amount. So this year is different. So I won't know until July what the equalization is. That's when the towns will give me their preliminary numbers, and then early August is when it's
August
finalized.
1st. It'll be 100% in this town.
Yeah, no, so
Always.
yes, and that's
Always.
so. And I think what I heard was Wilmington was looking at doing a reevaluation, a reassessment, and kind of going through the process and wanted to keep it at 80% until they finished the re-equalization of and reassessment of all their properties.
The state gives each township, I think, $6 per parcel if you go to 100%.
Okay.
They really incentivize the towns to use 100%.
And I find it interesting because I don't think it's necessarily across the board in Saranac Lake. I never really focused on it until the last 6-7 years, and mine have never been 100%. It's
Right.
like 80-something% or whatever. So I'm like, well, obviously they have a reason for it, but we
Right.
generally typically have had 100%. Knowns and unknowns, the only real change there is the health insurance increase was settled just after our first hearing a month ago, and that is an increase of 5.5% is their premium. If you're to look at ours, it's actually a little higher. If you look at that actual line, it's sitting at almost 9%. Because that is anticipation. One thing we want to do, we should do, is always have extra in that, because if we have someone that goes on a maternity leave or a leave of absence and we hire someone for greater than 10 weeks, we offer them. So we have to anticipate that every year something like that will happen, and we're going to be paying out additional health benefits for those temporary employees. So that's why the percentage looks higher than this. It's because trying to anticipate filling voids throughout the year, the unknowns, if you will. And, so that's really, if you look at it, the budget itself, it's again, pretty straightforward. The revenue sources, it's still the same amounts that's gotten moved around, but until the state passes their budgets, we won't know what our true foundation aid is, and that will change what we use for appropriated fund balance and so on and so forth. So questions on this round of the budget?
Okay. Just regarding the budget calendar, which is also on the hearing agenda, just looking for clarity. So on our existing budget calendar, Karen, we have the Wilmington and Lake Placid hearings on the 7th and 14th
There's just one hearing. the 7th.
in Wilmington, right?
Yes.
So we'll amend this budget calendar, Dr. Lewis.
Yeah.
That, okay. So no May 14th. Okay,
And then next year we'll have the. one
we'll have it in
up
Lake
here.
Placid.
Yeah.
So any questions about any of the information included in the hearing before we
Thank you.
go to the regular session?
Yeah.
All right.
You're not gonna go through any of these other documents?
Okay. Attachments.
So we're going right to our meeting.
Do you need to do anything with
No,
The
we're
recording?
gonna, oh, no, with what?
the recording?
No, because we're gonna open the meeting, and then when we go into executive session, we'll need to do.
Okay, let's call the regular meeting to order and please, I ask that everyone stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to our consent agenda, the recommended action. Approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda. 6A minutes, 8B bus lease proposition resolution. May I have a motion, please?
Should we have that in there, Karen, before we, just a clarification?
Oh,
point,
yeah,
sorry.
no, we need to remove that,
So,
so it'll just be 6 minutes.
6 in.
I will.
Second. Any discussion? Please vote.
Aye. Didn't pop
Mine's
up.
not popping up.
You did.
There.
There it is. Must be.
Ryan, is your computer working?
Yeah.
Yes.
Got a little window that says, "Do I want to use AI?"
Uh,
No.
See how the meeting goes.
It is.
6 yes.
Okay. Moving on, to a proposed executive session. The Board of Education, asks for a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing tenure recommendations. May I have a motion?
Move it.
Sorry.
I don't think there's any discussion. No. Please vote.
You're fast today. I know. 6 yes. Session at 6:17.
Oh.
So. I don't know.
I'm trying
Isn't that great, teenager?
I just want a simple click the button, camera comes on, I can talk now.
to.